All right. I think we are up and running and good to go for the stream. Let me get everything moved over to the jam stream template, and we will go ahead and get started. All right. I think everything's loaded up here. Let me move my model. We have all the audio stuff good. I might have to tweak my mic settings a little bit. I was messing around with the loop settings, trying to get everything configured correctly since it's been a little bit. We've done one of these. But I think that's good for now, and I can always adjust stuff on the fly. People give me some feedback. So I'm going to put on a real quick track that I was messing around with earlier, just as some background music, and kind of go over what I want to talk about today, kind of the plan, and then we will go ahead and get started. Okay. Beat should just be in the background. It's a pretty simple combination of loop tracks that I made while I was getting ready for the stream today. And so today it's a way to kind of circle back with some of the discussions. We'll go through kind of intro warm-up drills like we normally do, and then I will do some discussion on technicality for the kind of sound theory and technique discussion. There's some stuff I've been working on that I kind of want to talk through and maybe show off some of the progress and things that I've been experimenting with outside of these jam streams. Be a little bit new, some new stuff. After that, we'll probably run through more of the practice and drills and applying some of the stuff we've been talking about. And then from there, we're going to spend the rest of the time working on BGM brainstorming ideas. And so let me pause this for a sec. I need to be a little bit careful because of the feedback on here, but as hinted in the tweet, and I'll have to probably explain this multiple times depending on when people show up, but I have acquired a new collaborator for these jam streams that'll be making an appearance here or there as I see fit, and that is Casio-chan. And so the regular synthesizer Kun is not hooked up today. Instead, I have a different synthesizer that I got over the weekend, and that is Casio-chan. And this one is a bit more simple. I got the second hand, and it's a small, like, mini keyboard. It's got a maybe third of the octaves, half the octaves of the main big one that I've been using on stream and for a lot of my BGM creation. But I was able to get this used one second hand. It's like a baby keyboard almost, and it's really portable, which is kind of nice. The sound sets and instruments are not as complex. This is a much older model. I think this one's probably 40 years old, but it has presets for different instruments and behaves like any other synthesizer. It's a little more limited, but I like the portability of it. And so we're going to be experimenting with Casio-chan today, trying to adapt the sound sets and see how it flows over into the BGM creation side, because, again, instrument sets are different. This is a MIDI keyboard, I think. It's got MIDI presets on it, which I've never really messed around with, but we'll kind of walk through the instrument sets when we get there a little bit later. And I think this thing might actually have an idle cutoff, because I had it turned on earlier while I was getting everything configured for the stream today, and then at some point just shut off. So if you're not actively inputting things, it might have a timeout window and just turn itself off. I don't know. This is an AC powered keyboard. I think it takes C or D batteries too, so it is a lot more mobile, but it doesn't have stereo outs, which is a shame, because if it had stereo output, then I could use a stereo cable to plug it into the loop, and I'd be able to plug in synthesizer via aux. So this thing only has aux outputs and some like old mic cables, which I don't even recognize the inputs for them. They must be like kind of older cable tech. So right now I have Casio-chan plugged in via aux, just like I have the regular synthesizer, and that'll function fine for now. but I'll probably just turn it off when I'm not working on BGM stuff, and then enable it once we have everything turned on and we have everything kind of hooked together. But it should be an interesting experiment. It's gonna function a little differently as far as our instruments and our choices from our regular tool set, but it should be interesting. So for now, we will turn that off because it suffers from the same input distortion with my mic settings as the regular synth does. So it'll probably be best just to turn it off. And then when we mess around with it in BGM, I'm going to have to turn my mic boosts off so I don't get that fuzzy distortion just like we've seen in the past. But that should be interesting. So stay tuned for later. We'll go on a bit more of an in-depth tour with Casio-chan. So for warm-ups, well, it's been a few weeks, I think, since we've done a jam stream. I think I'll start with the kind of basic percussion rhythm loops and kind of drill back into the normal warm-up stuff that we do to get everything properly warmed up, get the blood flowing, and then from there we'll probably segue into discussion on technicality. I thought about maybe doing the freestyle challenge endurance tests that we've done before today, but I think I'd rather spend some time talking about some technique stuff instead, and we'll push that off into a future one. We can chunk out, a decent amount of time, since beating my own personal best for freestyling is going to take longer and longer, assuming I do it successfully every time. So we'll focus more on the discussion today, and then we'll get back to that in the future. So I guess we'll start with a few basic freestyle drills to sort of get everything warmed up, and then we will proceed from there. So let's get it. Fix my mic. I think I need to get a new mic arm. This one keeps slowly sagging. I think it might be getting worn out. I feel like the BGM snare needs a little bit more of a warm up. It doesn't feel as sharp as it usually does. And usually that's a function of just as things get warmed up and I get kind of more kind of acclimated to doing beatboxing stuff. It just depends. And one thing I've noticed is kind of strange is sometimes it'll take me longer than other times just to warm up that particular snare, and I'm not exactly sure why. It could have something to do with whether or not I've been talking and actively using muscles in my face versus maybe waking up first thing in the morning, but the crispness and sharpness of that BGM snare, the usually just depends, but I have to warm up with it no matter what. Every other snare, main snare that I use for sound sets and whatnot, don't require any real warm up at all. They're easy to do cold, which is probably why people focus on things like the K snares and PF snares when they're learning, because they don't require a lot of conditioning, just practice with control and maybe a little bit of endurance and fine tuning muscle memory so you can do the sounds. So, for example, things like your outward K snare, that doesn't require any sort of warm up. I could do that in my sleep all day long. Inwards K, that also doesn't really put a ton of stress on any muscles in your mouth. That's another one, really easy to just do completely cold. For the rim shot, also pretty easy to do once you know the technique for it. Doesn't require any warm because it's essentially the same motion as an inwards K, just with no breath. So that where it comes into play as far as muscle conditioning and all that is the technicality aspects of the TKK, which we'll talk a little bit about later. As far as other snares, PF, any of the P blank snares, PS, PF, PSH, all of those don't really require any warm either, since it's just lip pressure and control. So like the regular breathed, kind of high, sharp PF snare, or the lower unbreathed, kind of loose PF snare that I do sometimes. Sounds a bit more dull. Both of those, and don't require any sort of really warm up. And once you've been conditioned to doing sounds and the techniques, then they're really easy to kind of pull from the repertoire of sounds without having to, warm up and get the blood flowing. And I guess this is kind of a segue into the discussion of technique, since I did want to spend some time talking about some of the things in sound theory that I haven't really had a chance to hit on a ton lately. We'll go ahead and get started and kind of work in some warm-up stuff in between, because I didn't really structure a set series of things or quote-unquote lessons I wanted to talk about today. I just had a general topic that I wanted to kind of spend some time going through the weeds on and show off some kind of new techniques and things I've been experimenting with in cooking since we've done the last jam stream, because I haven't really showed them off on stream at all. And so this will be kind of like a preview, and then we'll work this into the whole idea of developing sound techniques and sound sets and all that. And so going back to one of my favorite topics in beatboxing technique and sound theory, I'm going to spend some time in the discussion here, and we'll change the caption. Let me fix that real quick. We call that technique and sound theory. And we'll be here for a little bit talking about some techniques, and we'll see how long the discussion goes. But in these sections, I usually try and pick one or two things within the realm of beatboxing technique to talk through and explain and kind of give my take on how it fits into what I practice and what I'm kind of trying to develop for myself, and for anybody who might be new to beatboxing, curious about it, or interested in learning, that sort of thing. And we talked about a whole wide range of different topics throughout all the jam streams I've done. I think we're probably on like 40 something, maybe in the mid 40s. It's hard to believe I've been doing this for that long. But we've talked about basic instrument sets as part of the toolkit, and how they fit into constructing simple rhythms, more complex patterns, and then chaining together all of that stuff to form fully fleshed out routines. We've talked a little bit about the specifics of techniques, how to get certain sounds to come out when you're learning, kind of helpful hints, maybe not so much tutorials unless someone asks me for a full breakdown, but a kind of overview of here's how you get certain sounds to come out. We've talked about the basses, one of the more integral parts of beatbox construction when it comes to songs, sounds, sound sets. One of the big backbones of a routine is the bass and kind of that forceful low end complement to things like a rhythm or a melody. And we talked about a whole variety of bass techniques, from throat bass to vibration bass to vocalized chest to inward bass, probably the newest one in the arsenal, and how different techniques affect the way those sounds work. Bass is one of my favorite topics to discuss because it's very varied. There's a lot to kind of cover and a lot of different ways to go about creating the sounds, and a lot of techniques I can't do. And then we also instituted the sound inventory, I guess, way of organization system, at least for me. We haven't done that in a while, and maybe in the future I'll kind of come back and do like an update to the sound inventory. But that's going through a structured series of lists of all of the things that I practice and am learning and know, and as a way to kind of catalog, here's all of the things in the toolkit, because just keeping it all in your brain, it's really easy to forget when you're trying to practice and memorize a whole bunch of different things. So the sound inventory was a way to say, okay, we're going to go through snares. Here's every single snare in the list that I know. Again, this is a sound inventory just for me and for the stuff that I practice. Then we're going to go to basses. Here's all the bass techniques, A through Z. Here's all of the technicality patterns that I know, A through Z. And it's kind of just a way to sequentially go through and keep track and make sure nothing is missing from the list, so that if I ever need to refer to it later and say, I want to practice that one thing, it's there on the list, it's got an explanation, and it's easier to keep track of. And then the final thing we've spent a decent amount of time talking about on these jam streams from the beatbox sound theory and technique perspective is the idea of technicality, or concept of technicality. One of the cornerstone principles in beatboxing, and I think one of the most interesting things to talk about. And that's what I'm going to focus on today for the technique and sound theory part of the discussion. We've talked about it every other stream or so, as I've kind of brought up things from a perspective of here's what I'm practicing, or I saw this cool thing, let's see if we can do it. But today we'll kind of go through some status updates on technicality and what I've been working on, and then I want to go through some new concepts and new things and patterns that I've been practicing that are going to be pretty different from everything else and not stuff I've talked about before. So hopefully people will find this interesting, because it's going to be kind of demoing and previewing some new stuff that I haven't really shown on stream. And then as we progress through future jam streams, hopefully the progression and the improvement in technique will be something noticeable, as you always want to be trying to push techniques and get better and whatnot. And so for technicality, the overview, I'm not going to go through an overview here unless someone asks me to kind of break down the basic concepts. I feel like I've done that a lot, and I don't want to bore people with the same information. So instead, I'm kind of going to go straight to the patterns and things I've been working on, and then we'll get to the new stuff towards the end. So for basic technicality chains, I've talked about the TKP or KPT, the first series of sound set chains that I learned when first starting out in beatboxing, and figuring out ways to take those sound chains and put them in between different parts of a beat and transition to make it flow better and have more variety and kind of spice. So with the TKP, the functions well as a triplet pattern. That constant chain is the roll, which I don't do a ton in beats. It's a neat trick, but unless you isolate it and make that just part of an open section, chances are you're probably not going to be doing just a roll of consecutive sounds. It's generally a good way to practice and get better, but it doesn't really slot into beats that well. But what I've been trying to do is take patterns that I've been learning and refining and start sort of combining them together with this TKP or KPT sequence that I know really well, that I've been doing since the very beginning, the first thing I ever learned. And the way I've been trying to perfect it and fine tune and just see what kind of results I get is combining the TKP with the TKK. And so we talked about the TKK, the hat, outwards K noise, but not a K snare, and then a rim shot. The those three are what I consider probably the most basic entry-level patterns that most people start learning. And from talking to other beatboxers in the scene, it seems like that's fairly common, but it's not going to be the same for everybody, since not everyone really starts with Technicality and everyone starts in different places learning different things. But it seems like a lot of modern beatboxers start with the TKK as their kind of entry point into the concept of Technicality, which has always struck me as interesting because I was one of those weirdos who didn't start with that set. Again, I started with the TKP, so having to go back and learn the TKK and get better at it is something I'm actively doing constantly. Even up to this very day, I was looking at my calendar, and I have been beatboxing for a little more than 4 years now, and I did not realize it had been that long. I started about the spring, April, May-ish of 2019, and so it has been more than 4 years, and the time really flies. I still feel like I'm a real novice and newbie when it comes to beatboxing, but it's nuts. The time goes by that fast. And one thing I should probably do is go and listen to some of the streams from back during the early debut times in 2021, was it? Look at the jam streams and see how much different the sound progression and technique has come since then. I've definitely learned a lot of things, but it's hard to believe the time goes by that quickly. But going back to the idea of the TKK and the constant perfecting of that 3-sound chain and using it to work into complex patterns for speed and more kind of technical elements is something I practice every day. I try and practice at least for a set amount of time throughout the day, since I don't really have an easy way to just say, okay, I'm going to do nothing but beatboxing for 2 hours. It's a little bit more difficult, so instead I just try and get bits of practice in constantly throughout the day when I'm not actively doing something else important. And so drills and practice for the TKK is as simple as just doing it repeatedly. You start slow with the and you start with just the 3 set, then you start doing it one after another, trying to do it constantly but not too quickly, because the speed is not something that you inherently start with any of these patterns. You got to start slow, like we've talked about, work your way up to the muscle memory and consistency and get the sound cleaner, and then the more you do that, the faster it gets. And so you start going from a just 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, doing something like working with a metronome. Very handy because it allows you to keep time with these triplets. 1 2 3 4. And I don't know if I really talked about that particular aspect of how to structure drills. I tend to talk about what I do, but I should probably make it more of a priority to at least break down suggestions for people who might use this as a reference, I don't know, or might refer back to this later and say, if I want to learn this, what are some ways to go about doing it? What are some kind of proven methods that work well for other people, just as a way to learn? Because so much of beatboxing is learning from each other and learning from what other people have done as a way to kind of adapt that into something that works for yourself. And so for the, it's almost like a galloping rhythm in a way. and then condensing it slowly over time to get faster with it. You start going. Again, it's still triplets. Everything is still close together, but you're practicing and pushing that consistency and cleanliness of the sound with speed, trying to get it even faster and faster. And beatboxing is very much a practice, grind type of art form and hobby, which I like because I like things that require grinding. This is part of just the way my brain's wired. And so being able to practice something over and over again doesn't really bother me. And you can see progression, but you have to kind of commit to doing it more and more. You can't just practice 5 or 10 or 15 minutes of technicality once a week and expect to go from the to the. It just doesn't work that way. You have to practice consistently and put that time in, and you'll see progression much faster, which goes for any sort of learned skill. And it's not news to anybody here. And so taking that, I kind of just demoed what I was going to talk about, but pushing that triplet set from the rapid constant, it's essentially a circular roll of the, and pushing that even faster is how you're getting the, and my ability to do that is slowly improving. Again, a lot of that's endurance, and people can practice technicality for years and still find ways to improve their accuracy and endurance with the particular technique. But one of the things I like that's kind of interesting that changes the way the sound set works is something I've kind of touched on before. It's not the first time I've talked about it here, but it's changing mouth position when doing that. So just by changing the way your mouth is open or closed, kind of like you're forming a syllable like an ah, o, u, e, just by changing the position of your mouth when you're doing these tongue percussive patterns changes the way it sounds, which comes across on a mic in a pretty interesting way. So you could just do the same thing, same position, and it'll sound the same. It'll be the same repeated triplets in rapid fire. But one of the things I like to do, which is just kind of a different way to practice and a different variation on the technique, is to change my mouth position from like an ah and ooh as I'm doing it. So instead of a, it sounds more like, it's a little bit subtle to hear, but parts of the snares are changing just by mouth position. And we have a hydrate from Mysterious Phoenix. What's up, Mysterious Phoenix? How are you doing today? Welcome to the jam stream. I hope your Sunday is going well. And so talking about how the mouth positioning changes the sound set, you have something going from to, it's the final syllable that gets affected the most, or final sound, the rim shot. And just by changing mouth position, instead of a, you're getting a, pretty subtle, but when chained together in a set, instead of a, you're getting a, it's like a descending, slight descending pitch in the way that final snare hit is coming across. And that's kind of fun to do because you can do that descending pattern in triplets in a rapid chain. So again, unchanged, you have a, but if you're changing the mouth position to change the quote unquote pitch of that third snare hit in like a descending fashion, doing that same chain, you're getting, it tends to work a little bit better in more than 3 sound combos I found, just because there's more time for the change in position to affect the way the sound's coming out. And so that's one thing that's kind of an interesting variation. I don't see a ton. I know I've seen other people do it. It's not something I made up. But changing the mouth position on the rapid sections of the technicality pattern can really subtly change the way it's coming across. And that's pretty fun. It's also just a good way to practice because it pushes your mouth muscles, your tongue specifically, into slightly different positions and forces you to kind of adapt to having a sound come from different muscle memory spots. And so you're not just locked into one kind of hardwired location or technique, which is pretty important for beatboxing in general. Another variation on the kind of combining and stitching together the Technicality sound sets comes from, like I mentioned before, just pairing the TKK with another triplet pattern like the TKP, or mixing up the sounds so it's kind of a hybrid of both. It's not just 3 and 3. You might be mixing different sounds somewhere in between to combine them in different ways. So the easiest way to demonstrate that would be, instead of it being something like that's TKP rim shot. I think that's the notation for what that is. Instead of it's, which is five or six sounds just in a different order. So you were trying to do a whole complex stream of rhythmic sounds using these Technicality chains. Instead of it just being, it might be, and you're throwing in like an F hat in there as well. That's the f. So trying to break something like that down slowly. I should get a whiteboard set up so I can write these. I just don't have an easy way to type because my keyboard's off on the side over here. But doing something like yeah, I guess that works. That's a variation. So it'd be TKP or TKK mixed in with an F hat, bridging the different sound sets together, since it forms kind of like a transitionary sound. So gets a little messy if you're not too careful with it. With the that's FTKK. So instead of a TKK, it's FKK rather. So instead of it's a nope, that's 4. I'm wrong. FTKK. So that's kind of a different way to kind of construct that. So to kind of bring everything back on topic for why I'm discussing all this stuff at length, the complexity and sort of nuances and ways you can put together these simple sounds to change the patterns and then start working on doing them quickly is what makes Technicality infinitely fascinating to me. I could talk about it all day. I won't today for the sake of everyone watching, but it's a fascinating concept of sound theory and beatboxing that has so much potential. If you can come up with a way to combine the different sounds and make it work, then you can adapt it into something for the tool set and make it your own, make it something that is reflective of your style and becomes a pretty handy tool, again, in the tool set. All right. So to move on from the overview of Technicality, we'll be checking in with things like the TKK progression as we go. I don't want to dwell too long on just that one topic. Let's talk a little bit about some new stuff that I've been working on. And as I go through future streams and get things like the drop a beat redeem, where people ask me to freestyle a beat on the fly, I'm going to start working these new things in to get practice and get better at commanding them on the fly and slotting them into the different beats and freestyle stuff, because I want it to be a well-developed part of the arsenal, and it's not something I'm super good at. So we're going to talk about some variations on pops and clicks, which we have talked about in the past in previous streams. It's not the first time it's come up in the discussion. But I've been working after seeing some stuff from other beatboxers and getting some ideas for how it slots into the Technicality concept, that I really want to adapt that into something, because it's different and it's pretty cool. And so it was a kind of overview of what I'm talking about. Pops are a really elementary and simple part of beatboxing that most people probably don't realize is part of that arsenal and tool set because it's pretty basic. So I think most, if not anyone, everyone in some capacity can do a pop sound, which is just closing your mouth and letting out some air by kind of rolling your lips over your teeth to create a little bit of a complex way of describing that, but I think most people can make a noise. It's something that you just do at some point. It's very simple. I think babies eventually learn how to do that. But it does function as a beatbox sound, and I'm going to kind of explain how it does and how it connects to some other things with technicalities. So the two sounds and things that we're going to work on are pops, them. And I'll explain variations in a way that can be kind of adapted before I move on to clicks. But we're going to talk about clicks too. And I'm going to kind of start with introing click technique from the way I normally do them to the technique I'm practicing. So we'll get there. But for pops, it's actually surprisingly difficult to get that sound to be loud. You have to actively practice it because I think muscle memory and kind of the strength of your lip muscles, as it were, determines how loud that sound's going to come across on a mic. And I can actually see on the audio readout. So a pop for me with this setup sounds like, doesn't hit peak, doesn't hit close to the top of the audio limit, but it should be audible enough. And then I can kind of test this, since the more I work on it, the better it's going to get, and the more audible and pronounced the sound's going to get too. And so by just taking the pop sound, you can do things like drop its pitch by opening your mouth up and even hollowing your throat, and that's how you get the tennis ball pop noise. So instead of by kind of opening your mouth and dropping your jaw and then opening your throat a bit, it goes to gets more of a hollow resonance to it. The same way the clop, the regular, becomes more hollow if you open your throat up and you get the. That'll be a topic for future streams as well. I've been working on clops a lot too, but we'll focus on pops and clicks first. And so you could change the sound of the pop just by doing subtle changes and opening your mouth and throat up to get lower noises. That's pretty simple, and I think most people can figure that out once they play around with it. It's not a groundbreaking technique or any sort of secret. But one thing that's interesting is the pop sound, though, and that's the one I'm going to kind of focus on for the sake of what I've been playing around with on Technicality. Mysterious Phoenix says, my brain keeps going back to the popping cat meme. It's literally the sound you think of when you see that with the cat opening its mouth. That is the noise. Or like the lower. That's exactly it. But I think one thing I'm going to try and communicate here in the discussion is how this translates into this whole idea of technicality and stringing together sound sets. I'm going to try and do it since I've never talked about it here, but hopefully it'll make sense. And feel free to stop me if you have questions or you want me to explain something better. That's the whole point of the sound theory discussions, is to kind of talk through and explore these concepts so that you can get a discussion going, because it's really interesting stuff to talk about. And so taking that pop sound, you can practice getting them and just doing it as rapidly as possible, which again, not really something super complex, but if I try and push it, I can get pretty consistent eighth notes. Doing it faster than that's not really something I can do. I can't go like without it losing a lot of the sound and becoming just kind of more of like a bubbling noise. But this is something really interesting that applies to a whole bunch of stuff with this idea of technicality. If you pair them with another sound that is similar in mouth position and similar in sound, you can do it in a chain and have it sound faster. And so that's what we're going to talk about here, because this combo of stuff is, again, something I've been playing around with recently. About 2 weeks. I wanted to show this off on last week, but I couldn't stream last week. So anyway, been doing this for about 2 weeks, and I'm hoping to keep grinding through and getting better at it. So put the idea of the pop on the shelf for just 1 second. Okay, then let's talk about clicks, because these two sounds are going to go hand in hand, and I'm going to show exactly what I'm talking about. So clicks, again, clicks are something that I think most people have done at some point in their life and know how to do, but most people don't do on a regular basis unless you're in some sort of environment where you're making a noise that requires a click. And so using tongue pressure, just suctioning your tongue to the roof of your mouth and then popping it gets a, and it's going to be towards the middle back part of your tongue, and you're getting a, you know, if you've ever done like the finger guns, that, or had, you know, you guys probably understand what I'm saying, a click, tongue click specifically. Pretty simple. In beatboxing, it functions kind of like a snare tube, and I can kind of show what I'm talking about there, but if you practice that click motion a lot, you will find that it becomes very strong after practicing it for a consistent amount of time. And so I'm doing it pretty lightly, just to, but if you really push it, you can get a little bit tough because there's no real resonance here. I'm not on a mic, but you can really get a strong clicking noise by practicing that more and more. And so you can also learn how to do it quicker. It's easier to do rapid clicks than it is rapid pops. But if you take that noise and just start chaining it together, you can get. So you might put it in a beat and have it sound something like. Something like that, functioning like a snare. Pretty simple. And if I was going to teach someone who's brand new to beatboxing how to do something simple, rather than start with one of the other snare techniques, which does require having to learn how to do it, I would say if you can do a click, then you can do a really simple beat. You just need a kick, a hat, or and a click. Those are 3 sets. You can 3 instruments from the sound set. You can make a beat. You just have to practice putting those together. Okay? So basic tongue click, as most people know them. The one that I've been working on is a variant technique from the tongue click that uses the tip of your tongue right on the ridge of your soft palate. So about the same spot when you're using the suction for a regular click. Same spot, but you're using the tip of your tongue and controlling the sound a little bit more so it's a bit lighter. And that sounds like you're still using suction, but you're using the tip of your tongue and kind of hitting that sloping part of the roof of your mouth, and you're focusing the sound in there. So instead of a sharp sound, you're getting a, and if you make kind of like an O shape with your lips, that's how you're getting it to be kind of more echoey and a little bit more resonant. Hey, Red Dragon's here. What's up, Red Dragon? Welcome to the stream. Hope your day is going well. We are talking about the nuances of technicality, something I talk about a lot here. And so this variation of the tongue click, which I think, again, most people can do if they experiment around with pressure, instead of it's a, it sounds more like a talk, like a tick-tock type noise, like a, that's the sound I was going for. And it's faster because it doesn't require quite as much of the tongue muscle to do. And again, it comes across the mic differently than that. You have a, or, and like I was demonstrating with the regular click, the more you practice that simple click variant, the faster you can do it. So I did it without even thinking there, but you take the, and by changing your mouth position, you can change its pitch pretty easily, and it goes kind of up and down. So instead of you're getting a, and hopefully that's picking up. It's a bit softer sound, which is why I've been practicing it so much. But again, just taking and learning how to do that consistently is going to train endurance, and your tongue will get used to it. And so what does it all mean? How does it tie together? The pop and I'm going to call it a TO click or something like that, just so I can keep the notation separate in my head. But when I refer to clicks for this part of the discussion, I'll be talking about that kind of click. So like a TO click, I'm going to call it, instead of the regular tongue click. The pattern, to get all the way to the point of why I'm mentioning this, is combining the pop with the TO click. And so the pattern that I'm practicing sounds, I'm calling it POTO. The PO is what the notation I'm using for a pop. I don't know if that's universal. It's just easiest way for me to map the pattern out when I write it. So I'm calling it POTO, POTO, or POTO, POTO pattern, because it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 sounds. One pop, tongue click, TO click. Another pop, another TO click. And altogether it sounds like. And it doesn't sound really that complex on its own, but because you're combining them with another sound that's similar, it's not the same, but similar in pitch and sound, you're putting them into a chain to do the whole series faster. So you could do a 1, 2, 3, 4 with the pops, but I can't do it faster than that. Now, and it loses a bit of sound because it's difficult mouth position wise to reset to that noise. But if I do using the clicks in between the pops, it's easier because my tongue is hitting in between and allowing my mouth to reset the position, my lips to reset the position for the pops. Hence, you're going faster in a sequence. So what does it mean? Again, why does it matter? This POTO pattern is what I've been practicing as a way to adapt into technicality for filling in parts of the beats, just like we would any other type of sound set. And I can demonstrate that so you folks can actively see what I'm talking about. But just practicing now. Pretty simple, but it's just like we talked about technicality. You can string together a transition sound in between, like an F hat, and it links the chain together and allows you to kind of circle back and do it like a cyclical chain. So the way I've been doing that would be something like, and when I first started doing it, I could do it very slowly and in like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 patterns. But as I've been practicing and getting the kind of mouth muscle memory down, it's speeding up. And it's kind of an interesting variation on these filler sound rhythms that are put together because, again, we talk about the TKK, we talk about the TKP, but now we have a POTO, and this is normally a 4 pattern instead of a 3, so then it slots into the different things, or different patterns, other patterns, differently than a 3. Might be a little bit more complex of a topic to talk about here. Doesn't really matter for the sake of kind of going through the demonstration. And so the POTO is pretty interesting in that, again, it's a different way of creating that sound. And the way I kind of found out that I could adapt this into a technicality pattern was at some point I was just messing around with pops and tongue clicks. And what I did first, before I started looking at the actual syllables or sounds, was I was just doing which is just a pop and the same kind of light tongue click, but without using the O-shaped mouth to get so like a light version of a strong regular tongue click. Instead, just using the tip of the tongue in about the same place, but without changing the sound with mouth position. So I was just doing and I wasn't using it for anything. I was just doing it at random because I wanted to practice pops. And I thought, that's interesting because it forms a really fast chain on its own. And I didn't have to practice it for that long just to get it to go quickly. It's 1 2. It's 1 2 1 2 1 2. And so I said, I want to take that idea and mess around with the click part and change the sound and see how it fits. So that's when I started changing the mouth position to get more of a O shape for that resonant sound. So instead of it sounds more like a. And that talk noise, like the TO click, can be manipulated with mouth positioning a whole lot more because you could change its pitch. And so that's how I was getting the. And I'm working on getting it stronger, not quite to where I want it yet, but then I looped back to the original sound with the pop and said, okay, how are we going to get the pattern to actually kind of flow? And that's how we went from to So again, demonstration, it makes everything make a little more sense. So if I was going to do one sample beat, I need to think of a good way that I can slot it in and then kind of contrast with the other technicality stuff that we've seen up till now. So maybe we do something like and then that's using the TKP as the filler for the technicality part in that sample beat. If we switch it around and pull out and put in the pop click technicality thing instead, we'll get something like a little bit harder because they're trying to adapt a 4-note pattern into what was a 3 pattern before. But again, the filler is the some variation on that, and again, slotting in as a filler. So my to-do that I've been drilling a lot over the last couple weeks, I'm trying to get this to sound better, is adapting that POTO pattern into more things. So you're gonna start hearing me play around with that more in drop a beat redeems and other things, just because I want to be able to figure out all the different ways to apply it. And it's pretty interesting because it sounds different. I don't do a lot of click patterns at all. And I definitely don't use the pop for anything. Like I might use like a double hollow pop for like just like part of a lead into a beat, like but never as part of the technicality. So it's experimenting around with a new idea and concept, and I think it's really cool. It's just gonna take time to get better because I could do the pop click pattern somewhat quickly, but it's not loud. And so on its own, I could do decently loud, but as soon as it's paired together with the other sounds, it's harder to do because I'm not used to it. So that's the practice portion. So when you hear them, the goal is to get every sound to be as loud as every other part and not have kind of taper off a little bit. And then ultimately, when you start tying this together with the other technicality sounds, we might have a real complex, like 12-note pattern that has TKPs, TKKs, and POTOs. I'm going to call them like a POTO pattern all together. And maybe I'll try and do it right now. It might be something like, oh man, that's really hard. That's very different mouth positions for those sounds. So it'll be like, ooh, yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to practice that. That's hard because that. Yeah, it's completely different parts of the mouth and different parts of movement with the tongue. So that's going to be difficult, but if I can figure it out, it'll probably sound really neat. So anyway, I think we need to move on to BGM ideas because I want to demo the stuff with Casio-chan who's been sitting patiently while I've been talking about nerdy beatbox terminology and whatnot. But technicality will continue to be a topic of discussion, and we will be checking in more as things go. All right. Let me see. I gotta clear this off. Yeah. And hopefully it saved my boost. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna need to be a little careful because I'm gonna turn stuff on and off. So now we're gonna go into some brainstorming ideas for BGM tracks, which we've done here on stream before, but we're going to be utilizing a new collaborator here, and make sure the power's on. You're gonna hear a bit of distortion on this because my mic boosts for my regular mic are also picking up from the instrument, and so you'll hear some fuzziness, but I'm going to turn all that off when I actually start recording stuff to loop. But turn it down a little. This is Casio-chan, new synthesizer, a mini synthesizer that I got. And so we're going to be using the instruments and sound sets on this keyboard to come up with some ideas for BGM stuff. And I'll probably do like I've done on the last couple sessions where I'm essentially noodling around with ideas and forming the track bit by bit, and then I'll come back and turn all my mic boosts on so I can talk to you folks, because I have to turn them off to record from the synth, and then I got to turn them back on to talk, or you won't be able to hear me. It'll be too soft. And so before we get into any of that, let's look at the differences between what we had on Synthesizer-kun and here with Casio-chan. So this one's a lot more simple. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 different instrument presets versus like 700 on the other synth. So this is going to be more limited, but I think we could play around with the sounds and make them interesting and do some interesting stuff because it's different. So we'll go through real quick. We got piano, electric piano. Again, you'll be hearing the fuzziness from the mic boosts. I can't do anything about that, but it'll go away once we actually start recording. So electric piano, we've got a harpsichord. I like harpsichords, one of my favorite instruments. We've got something called a funky clavi. It's a different type of keyed instrument, I think. We've got a vibraphone. Kind of like a xylophone or like a chime instrument for bells. We've got jazz guitar. Oh, there we go. Jazz organ. Regular organ. This is going to be like a church organ, I think. Oh no, this is just like more like a digital organ. Oh, pipe organ, that's the next one, okay. Yep, like a big cathedral church organ. We've got accordion. Does not sound like an accordion to me. I can hear it a little bit, but it sounds more like a really distorted saxophone almost. Got brass ensemble. Again, I was talking about it at the beginning of the stream. I'm pretty sure this is designed to be a MIDI keyboard. It's old. It's very old. This thing's, I think, like 40 years old. But all of the instruments sound very kind of compressed and artificial, which I think is the point. That's why I think it'll make for some interesting options for BGM tracks. But this is a brass ensemble. Strings. Even the strings, they sound very kind of like metallic and tinny, which is, again, interesting. Very different from the kind of more quote-unquote realistic representations of instruments on the other synth. Flute. Mysterious Phoenix says retro synthesizer. Yeah, I could look up right now what year this came out, because I have the model number. I'm kind of curious now. This is a MT240. Late 80s. So quite literally 40 something years old, about almost 40 years old. Cool. Retro indeed. Okay, so this is flute. Pretty simple. It sounds similar to some of the other flute instruments we've seen. Synth reed, so like a synth reed instrument, like an oboe maybe. Yeah. That sounds like a maybe high range clarinet or like a really, really artificial sounding oboe. And the low end sounds like a bass clarinet. Or maybe like a bassoon. Mysterious Phoenix says we are number one. I don't want to get sued, but yes, I almost played the melody from We're Number One. It's a great meme. Okay. Digital chorus. I wonder what this sounds like. Yep, that's definitely a chorus type noise, but it sounds, again, very artificial. Almost sounds like a theremin. I could probably put some effects on this thing to change it into like a really, really similar to a theremin sound. This next one is just called metallic sound, so kind of like a really, really artificial sounding plucked instrument noise. Almost sounds similar to the harpsichord, maybe a little more metallic harpsichord. Okay. Next up, bells. A little bit of a reverb and delay on the noise for these. A lot of echo, actually. That's interesting. Now we have synth ensemble, I think this is. So kind of like a mix of the wind ensemble and string ensemble. It's not really layered a whole lot. It just sounds, again, really metallic and kind of artificial. Interesting. Okay. And the last one, we've got percussion. The percussion set here is extremely limited, so I might have to do some of my own sounds for this, for some of these beats. But we have like drum set, essentially. On snare, we've got 2 snares. Rim shot. Several hats. Several different hats. Hi-hats, crash, ride, cymbals. And then some miscellaneous percussion noises, including... This one's great. I still do not know what this is called or what creates this sound, but it's on every percussion synthesizer set under the sun. That's really fun. Like, you could do something super simple with that and just do something like I don't know how practical you ever use something like that for, but it's just a funny noise. Alright, that's enough of that. The power of the loop. What else do we have here? Hey, Crusher's here. Crusher says bees. I don't know. That's not a buzzing noise. I'm just trying to figure out where it comes from. Also, welcome. Welcome, Crusher. Hope your Sunday is going well. I don't know. I think we could play around with that noise. I'm just curious as to what it's called. The low one. There's three pitches to this. Loop it in threes. I could create a really obnoxious beat with that, but it's really funny. Okay, last sound in the set, what they call bass, which is like from what I've heard, it's a really kind of synthesized bass. It sounds like, oh, there's two different kinds. The upper octave sounds like this. I don't know what you call that. It's a heavy distortion bass. But if you go further down on the octave, it sounds kind of like a electric string bass. I think we could probably adapt this into some bass tones, throw guitar to bass under it to give it really heavy low-end resonance, and then I think it'd function pretty well. But by itself, it's pretty simple and nondescript. And so that is the entirety of the instrument sound sets on Casio-chan here. Again, pretty limited, but I think we can play around with the commands and presets and input things on the loop and really change the way things sound. So this whole exercise is just a different tool to put into our BGM brainstorming and trying to get some different sounds. And so I guess first off, we need to think of where to start. So we'll start doing some BGM brainstorming now. And I think I'll do what I've done in the past, where I run through a bunch of ideas with my mic boost off because I have to turn them off for the synthesizer. Put something together along the way and then see what we come up with. Probably take me, I don't know, between like 10 and 15 minutes or longer. And then once I have it sort of mapped out completely, then I'll turn the boost back on and kind of reverse engineer what we did. And if anything happens along the way, I'll have to turn the boost on to talk and then turn them back off to record stuff. So let's see what we come up with. Like, okay, it's not going to matter, but just to demonstrate what I was doing with the new synthesizer earlier, I'm going to go back one track on my loop. This is the background beat I was using at the beginning of the stream, but this is what I came up with using the instruments. This is kind of a sample, and then we'll start off a new one. So let me go backwards here. Okay, I'm going to put my boost about here. Doesn't need to be perfect because I just want to show off the track itself. But this is what I made earlier. Okay, I'm going to put my boost about here. Doesn't need to be perfect because I just want to show off the track itself. But this is what I made earlier. real simple, kind of a laid back, kind of chillish type song. But this is all using the instruments from Casio-chan here. So now we're going to take all that, try and come up with something a little more fleshed out and a little more complex on a new file. So let's clear everything off. I'm going to use the percussion set to create the rhythm here. And then maybe if we do another one, I might switch and do my own beatbox sounds. Because again, the percussion sound set is extremely limited. So I'm going to turn off all of the boosts so that I can get stuff recorded cleanly without distortion. And I'm going to try and put together an entire track, see how long it takes, and then we'll come back and talk about it. So let's see what we got. I think of a genre to do here. Sorry, my voice is going to be low. All right, we can work. I think we can work with that. And move on to bass and some other things, and we'll see what happens. Alright, let me put on my boost back on. Alright, that's better. Alright, so that was an interesting combination of ideas and sounds. Kind of picking up the pace a little bit. Hey, Lava King's here. Lava King has redeemed a Raku Faktu. Oh, okay. Let me pull up the old list. Okay, here's a real life fact from the past that I don't think I've talked about before on stream because the specifics of which I wanted to save for like a story time stream in the future. But your fact about me is I have been snowboarding twice and was almost seriously injured the first time. And that is a funny story that I'll have to tell at some point. But first run on snowboarding here on the Earth ski slopes was almost disastrous. We can look forward to hearing about that at some point. I have terrible old man joints, so I can't go back and go snowboarding anyway now, but many, many, many eons ago, first outing ever, not go well. But also welcome, Lava King. Hope your Sunday's going well. Okay, so let's talk about what we did here. So I wanted to pick the pace up a little bit, but this is kind of more of a, I don't know what you call this, like a maybe hip-hop adjacent type beat. So I'll keep everything low so I can talk over it, but we established kind of a simple beat with, you know, kick variation. Again, the sound set on Casio-chan is very limited when it comes to percussion. So this is pretty much the extent of what you're going to hear for kicks and snares. There's some cymbal things you can mix in, but it's really not that extensive for this particular instrument. But establishing kind of a mid-tempo beat. Again, this one is clocking at 89.5 beats per minute, so it's pretty slow. And then I wanted to have kind of a more kind of dark-ish sounding bass line instead of something that was kind of bouncy and higher, kind of lighter in energy. And so that's why I went in and I layered two different instruments that sounded kind of similar and put guitar to bass to give it the low end. That's how we're getting a I can hear it on my headphones. There's decent bass, but I think I could have probably pushed it a little more. If we had a low end subwoofer, this would probably have pretty good low end to it. Next track we add in, actually I'm gonna do this in the order I kind of created them. I added in this filter distortion with, I think it's harpsichord I used. And it creates this kind of blip signal noise, which I've been working in here or there. I've used it before in other tracks, but it sounds like. And I followed the same note progression as the bass line. It's just one note, and then when right before the end, it steps up two steps. And it sounds like kind of a robotic noise. Interesting kind of effect. And then from here, was it track 3? No, I think we did 5 first. Hold on, let me save this. It'd be quite a shame to lose all that work. So let's see, let's put on 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 4. And I think 5. Oh no, I definitely did 3 first. Anyway. This is one of the kind of metallic noises, and I added I've been using the slicer across all these different sounds, the high-end sounds, to get that kind of interrupted signal type noise. and a little bit of delay to get it to echo and kind of reverb a little bit. And then we have the last track. This would be alternating with 5, I think. Again, Slicer is creating that really rapid beeping rhythm, which is really cool. I've been fiddling around with that a lot. I need to make sure I don't overuse it. And I threw in a kind of a filter transition as I was noodling around with the sounds on here, which is how you're getting you get a muffled noise, have everything kind of drop out, and then as I turn the dial, I can drown it out even more to just get the low end. Turn it up. And then turn it off. I don't think I would do a drop for a song like this. It doesn't really seem to fit. So the way I see this one kind of playing out from start to finish, I think would be different parts of the rhythm, or not rhythm. The rhythm would stay the same, but I think different parts of the high end and melody sections would kind of alternate or drop in and out. So maybe we do something like. And come back in. Could even try and mess around with reversing some of this stuff, but I think it's gonna sound weird. Let's try the high melody. That's not bad. The rhythm is a little bit funky because it's playing the whole looped track in reverse, so it's not synced to the rhythm in reverse. But you could probably, if we wanted to make that like a part B, you could probably do something with that. It's not so off that it's unlistenable, I think. So yeah, I foresee parts of the progression switching off from track 3, which is the beeping synth, to this kind of more strummed, distorted one, since the melodies on both of those, I think, conflicts a little, so I wouldn't really want to have them at the same time. It doesn't sound terrible, but I think they compete a little bit, so I'd want to have one or the other. Now, thinking about how we'd structure the outro, I think we probably pull everything off except for the bass. Maybe we cycle in the kind of signal and we cut it off there. I'm gonna have to listen. One thing I didn't think about was having my mic sensitivity turned up a lot so I can talk does create a bit of feedback on the track, so I'm gonna have to listen to that later. Hopefully it's not too loud, because normally when I record BGM tracks off stream, I don't have my mic enabled at all. If I'm working purely with the synth and the loop, I don't have my mic on at all because I don't want it to create that feedback. So I'll have to see. Let's see. Listen to the bass beat. there's a bit of distortion on it, but hopefully it's not too noticeable. Maybe when we move on to the next one, I'm going to turn my mic sensitivity all the way down and make sure the boosts are off, and then I'll have to just reset it when I turn everything back on so that I can actually talk. That's probably the best way to do it, so I don't have an unusable series of recordings. Okay, let's move on. Let's do another one. Oh, before we do that, we need to name this one. So I'll put it back on again, just for a minute or two. Any suggestions for the name on this one? What I'll do is I'll write down whatever ideas we come up with, because I have to compile the stuff for release later. Lava King says Metro City Cyberspace. That's an idea. Metro City is gonna make people think of Final Fight, though. I think Final Fight takes place in Metro City. I could combine the two and make it one word, Metro City. Then it would be a little bit different too. That's good. I will take multiple suggestions and write them down and see if other people have ideas for what to call this. I think the kind of like futuristic-ish city vibe is in line with what Lava King's saying, so that's a good theme to kind of explore. Oh, there it is. Okay. I also have to be careful because I already have a song called Metropolis Dawn, so I need to make sure I'm not reusing the same words. I think I have at least 2 or 3 tracks in the entire library that has the word bass in it, including like not only just bass the instrument, but all your bass. This is one of the songs called literally bass. So let's see, get this one over here. Lava King says I'm getting a sci-fi network, lower end of a city vibe, like The Wire or something, or maybe kind of like the back alleys in like a Blade Runner environment. That's what it kind of feels like to me, like kind of a dark skulking theme based on the bass line specifically. It sounds a bit more kind of brooding, a little more ominous, you know, like you're going through like a shifty back alley in like a futuristic city and try not to get stabbed. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Metro City Cyberspace. It's good. Okay. Let's copy over into a new track. Okay, we'll save this here. All right, we're gonna start over from the beginning. I'm gonna turn everything off so I can get sound input from Casio-chan. Let's do an electronic song to kind of contrast with the one we just did, which was again kind of more of like a rock adjacent, hip hop adjacent kind of electronic-ish song. Let's go for like a pure like techno-ish vibe, kind of like a higher energy, higher pace, like maybe like a club beat or something that's going to be maybe in the same sort of setting, but let's go for higher energy and see what we come up with. And I gotta see if this thing has like a clap. Otherwise I have to do it myself. So I'm gonna turn everything off, start putting things together, and then we'll come back, and again, just like the last one, we'll talk about the results and see how everything shakes out. All right, let's turn everything back on and take a look at this very strange but kind of interesting electronic track. Lava King says Backyard Bayou Mafia because this gives off Sega Genesis stealth mission vibes. Yeah, it's the ring modulator track, I think, that gives it kind of more like 8-bit or maybe 16-bit kind of instrumentation. I want to tinker around with that a little bit more in the future because I think there's a way to kind of duplicate the chiptune sound set using a combination of input commands. I just don't know how to do it yet because I'm fiddling around with that on the other synth as well. There's definitely a way to kind of capture that kind of bit chiptune noise. I just have to figure it out. But if you look at the way that the tracks are set up on this one, this particular track with the ring modulator has pretty heavy distortion, and it sounds like it's very filtered. And that was done just by fiddling around with the settings on the ring modulator. I think that's going to be one of the instruments that lets me duplicate that type of sound. So I definitely need to mess around with that some more. Lava King says, now it sounds like old SMT. Yeah, a little bit, yeah. And so we're pairing that with the kind of dance beat. Real simple, 4/4 dance beat. Again, there was no clap snare on this particular synth, so I had to do it myself. That's my BGM snare. Threw a little bit of reverb on there to give it kind of more of an echo. Adding in the bass, we did. Again, I applied slicer to the bass on this one, and it sounds kind of more like a sequence. Pretty simple. And then we have kind of a similar type of signal input. Sounds different because I use a different bass instrument, but on track 5, it sounds like kind of an oscillating signal ping, or kind of like a, maybe not like a radar, but kind of a similar style. I think I would probably turn this one on and off. This wouldn't be playing through the whole song. It'd get kind of annoying after a while. And then on track 3, I've got to think about a little bit more. I just did a real simple 2-note descending melody with the chorus input, just to see what it would sound like. I kind of think this one needs to trade places with the ring modulator filtered one. I don't think playing these at the same time really complements. I think they kind of clash. You do something like drop out the distorted synth line, bring this one in, and then maybe have the beeping signal kind of coming in and out here or there, because these two kind of go together pretty well. I don't think it complements the distorted one quite as much. We can even add slicer effect to the whole thing. I've done this for a couple tracks already. It's kind of fun as a way to switch up the tempo. I have it applying to everything except for the beat. But it kind of sounds like the whole instrumental tracks with all the melodies are kind of oscillating, which you'll see that on the upcoming electronic release. I've done that a couple times. Hopefully not more than once on that album, but we could think about this as a potential way to segue from like a part A something like this. You can maybe go for everything in sequence and then the rapid slicer filter as a transition, and then when we take it off for the part B of the song, maybe we bring in the distorted ring modulator here. And I don't know if I want to outro it with that. Maybe we go for like a percussion based outro, because the track we just did before ended with the bass, I believe. I don't want to make it too similar, but let's save our work here. I think this one might need a little bit more polishing, but I think the basic structure works pretty well for an electronic type song. So I'm happy with the results, but I might tweak it a little bit more before I come up with a final version for recording. Let's see. Before we get ready to wrap up, though, we do need to name this one as well. This one sounds kind of like you're traveling to me. Maybe not traveling fast on like a high-speed train, but it almost sounds like you're moving through, maybe on foot, through kind of like a lit-up district or something in, again, futuristic setting. I think the setting from the previous one that we were talking about still holds true. But let me think. I don't want to put the word night in here because I have a whole album that's literally themed around night. It's in the title of the album. Lava King says, Riverside Noodle Stop. I don't know if I'm getting exactly like a restaurant vibe from this. I say, well, to me, it sounds more kind of like a something you'd hear in a club, but maybe not like a regular club. Maybe a one that's themed, or it's got kind of a certain type of aesthetic. No, it's like a pit stop. Let's turn the track back on and kick around some ideas here. It's like a pit stop because traveling. I guess the question would be whether or not it's, because it sounds like movement to me with the way beat's set up. So let's turn it on. Listen to it. The idea that I was kind of thinking, and Lava King, you can tell me what you think as well, because I do want some kind of things to bounce off of. I was thinking like digital transit, like something like riding in a car or maybe like a bus in through like a slow crawl through kind of like a city environment. Den of Neon, that would be good if the upcoming album that I'm working on isn't, again, it's got neon in the title. It's the Neon Night Lounge for that one, so I can't really use neon or night, because if I wasn't doing that, then I think we could probably work in like a neon tunnel or something like that, but we can't do that, otherwise it's going to be too similar. I do like the kind of idea of a tunnel though. What if we did digital tunnel for this one? I don't think I've used digital on anything yet. I can look, but like tunnel, alley, we kind of hit the alley theme already. I was gonna say digital corridor, but that's gonna sound too much like the corridor digital folks. Definitely don't want to get sued there. Tunnel of ones and zeros. It's a little bit long of a title. I was also thinking like binary tunnel, but I don't really want to run the risk of that attracting some attention from people who might misinterpret the title. I kind of like digital tunnel. It has kind of the idea of traveling, like a futuristic digital tunnel. Oh, that's interesting the way you have it written, Lava King. Digi-tunnel. That's a little bit. It's a little bit more unique. Like make it one word. The titles don't have to be like 1 or 2 or 3 words. I just like to avoid them being like 4 or 5. I like Digi-tunnel because it sort of has a little bit of a play on like digital when you say it in one word like that. Yeah, I like that. Good idea. Digi-tunnel. Very good. I've got that written down. And that might give me enough tracks for a full release. Let me see how many I've got here. One thing I did week before last is I went and pulled a bunch of loops and recorded them off of here that go way back to a lot of our older jam streams. And so what I do is I collect those, and when I've got enough of them, then I put that together for a BGM release of all the stuff that you guys have helped me create on stream here. So let's see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11? Okay, that's not bad. Maybe I'll throw in a 12th bonus track. But with the 2 we just finished today, that makes 11. That's pretty good. I usually try and shoot between 12 and 15 in tracks. And that might be a release for the end of summer. We'll see. I'll need something in between the day and night releases coming up very soon, and then Halloween. I'll need something in between that. So, okay. Very good. So I'll save this. And let us get ready to wrap up for today. Let me see who's online to raid that we can go and spread the good vibes to. Oh, keyboard. All right. Let's take a look. Doesn't look like there's a ton of people online. Let me check my master list here. Yeah, looking at the looks like the majority of people I know aren't online right now, probably because it's a little bit early in the afternoon, at least for my time zone. That's all right. I don't need to raid somebody every time. I can check and see if there's any VTubers doing music stuff on the Explorer. Let me do that before we wrap up today. Doesn't really look like it. I don't want to spend a lot of time just searching for stuff. That's fine. What we'll do is go ahead and go to outro. We'll keep an eye out for next time. There you guys can see the brand new stinger in case you didn't see it on the last stream. And with that, I think we will call that good for today. So hopefully this was interesting. It was good getting back into the swing of things, talking about beatbox stuff on these jam streams. And it was fun messing around with ideas with Casio-chan here on the BGM brainstorming. So we will wrap up, and I don't know when I'm going to be back next. Maybe Tuesday. We'll see. Tuesday, maybe Tuesday, Thursday. I gotta work on my schedule, but it'll go up on the Discord and on Twitter before the end of today. So once again, thanks for coming and hanging out. You all have a good rest of your evening.